Welcome. Today's post is Transformers in DIA Clone. Published on March 6, 2023. This week I tackle Transformers. Robots that in most major official iterations hide in plain sight and spy on human beings at the behest of government officers. What do you think that might be a symbol for? Here are the topics we'll be decoding today. You can always find this list in the description below. If you enjoy this video, please press the like button and subscribe for weekly full-length blog posts and shorter, more shareable videos. Let's begin. Doesn't matter what the thing is, if it's popular it probably has a hidden symbol to it. Otherwise, the media wouldn't bother making it that popular. The most powerful and long-lived comms are often ones of necessity. They create a symbol that fulfills a necessary role, and from that perspective, what is the symbol of the Transformers toy line? Few look twice at kids' toys, even one with a tagline, "More than meets the eye." That tagline is describing how they are robots in disguise, but let's consider what that might symbolize. Why is the most popular Transformer originally a VW Beetle? Why is the mascot a semi-truck? In the original cartoon, Bumblebee is tasked with spying with a human partner along the riverbed. He then gets captured and reports back the secrets of the enemy. Contrast this to the film. The Michael Bay films had them hiding in plain sight as alien refugees, spying on humans in secret, and working with the US military on joint missions. Do you know what real job that parallels? DIA/AID clone. Those that work with the DIA. It just so happens that the original name of the Transformers was DIA clone. The cartoon establishes the symbolism. The cooperation between robot spy and human. The core idea is hiding in plain sight and the ability to disappear. Cooperation between tech devices and human beings. Japanese robots need information about the local area from the Americans. This defines the symbolism, as I've covered many comms similar to it, the comms network that was built with coordination between countries specifically focused on Japan for data transmission. That explains why Bumblebee is a bug. A symbol for someone that acts as a bugging device for another. In fact, I've already decoded Beetles in the same way, and there's another connection to this. In fact, a ton of connections that I'll cover more in depth in the future. October 1, 1961, DIA formed using Pentagon space. October 1, 1962, Beatles, Russia-Lenin symbolism plus British, contract with Brian Epstein lasts until death. October 1, 1962, Barbra Streisand, Israel symbolism, first contract. October 1, 1962, Beach Boys debut album, USA symbolism, Surfin' USA ushers in new type of music. February 25, 1963, Beatles' second single, Please Please Me. February 25, 1963, Barbra Streisand debut album. March 21, 1963, Barbra Streisand marriage to actor Elliot Gould, Gold. March 22, 1963, Beatles' first album, Please Please Me. July 5, 1971, Beatles Lennon Records anti-Nixon song, Gimme Some Truth. July 6, 1971, Barbra Streisand divorces Elliot Gould, Gold. August 15, 1971, Nixon shock, Nixon ends Bretton Woods gold standard upsets bankers. Beetle is a spy symbol. This timing with the Beatles and Barbra and Beach Boys, all begin with B and change the landscape of music, may represent Mossad/CIA/MI6/KGB ops launching. I already decoded Nixon as tied to Mossad, so the Jewish Barbra Streisand appears to have been a proxy for Nixon support. When Barbra married a man named Gould, gold it seems to have been used to represent the commitment to Bretton Woods. This was timed to the Beatles' first album. This is why when they divorced it signified the end of Bretton Woods. That same day the Beatles finished recording their anti-Nixon song that became a famous protest song to remove him. This is the root of funding, but how does this system keep all the players on the same page? Well, as I often decode these ops as tied to blackmail. November 3, 1954. Sonny Bono first marriage, second marriage is to the underage Cher/Cher. November 4, 1954. Hello Dolly precursor titled Matchmaker debut. December 5, 1955. Hello Dolly precursor titled Matchmaker Broadway. December 6, 1955. Volkswagen trademark filed, Beetle. October 5, 1962. A-12 Blackbird flies with J-75, in left nacelle, and J-58, in right nacelle, engines. October 5, 1962. Beatles' first single, P.S. I Love You. November 1963. A-12 Blackbird, State Route 71 precursor, reaches design speed/altitude. November 1963. Hello Dolly. December 16, 1969. Hello Dolly, Barbra Streisand stars. December 18, 1969. SR-71 lost 15 Blackbird in-flight explosions high-speed stall. September 16, 1975. MiG-31 first flight, State Route 71 Soviet version. September 15, 1975. Hello Dolly. Dolly Parton album. February 27, 1980. Chelsea Clinton born. February 27, 1980. Famous Barbra Streisand duet with Neil Diamond, You Don't Bring Me Flowers Anymore. There is a large set of expensive operations that exist in the world that are tied to blackmail. Attaching strings to powerful people. I've gone over how Sonny and Cher and Dolly Parton are strongly tied to blackmail comms in other posts, so I wasn't surprised to find that both of them are connected with Barbra Streisand as having major news events tied to Hello Dolly, the musical and film about setting up a millionaire with a girl. Notice the CIA's SR-71 cost hundreds of millions a year to maintain. These fees are tied to the ops of hotels and bugging. Like for example the Four Seasons that Al Walid owns. Wally/Walid opens with Hello Dolly. Check my Pixar post for this decode, but given Q specifically connected Walid to blackmail involving children and hotels. This is very relevant. The most successful piece of Transformers media of all time is the third film, and the plot kicks into gear when the Autobots go to Chernobyl. They find at Chernobyl a lost Autobot ship, and that the military had been holding back secrets. I've decoded Chernobyl in many posts as symbolic of blackmail ops. In my last post I made a breakthrough in decoding the shutdown as a transition in blackmail ops. Notice the words used to describe the moon landing as they discuss Chernobyl. We took hundreds of photos and samples and locked them away forever. This appears to be a parallel to the deal done to remove Chernobyl ops. Did you search the vault? This is likely a reference to the Al Capone Vault Ops, a show put on to demonstrate they weren't holding blackmail. April 21, 1986. Al Capone's vault hyped up as holding treasures, turns out to be empty. April 21, 1986. Mikhail Gorbachev announces that the Soviet Union is ready to dissolve the Warsaw Pact with the simultaneous dissolution of NATO. April 26, 1986. Chernobyl amusement park opens, symbol of Chernobyl. April 26, 1986. Chernobyl disaster begins. May 3, 1986. Dollywood amusement park opens. May 4, 1986. Chernobyl contained. May 12, 1986. Top Gun airs. I go over this in my last post, but it's especially relevant here. Certain international blackmail ops were shut down with Chernobyl. Not all of them, likely just the ones focused on takeovers of foreign lands. This was an exchange represented with Top Gun as it acted as a big promotion for the military. This was after many years of Hollywood negativity tied to the Vietnam War. Great Balls of Fire, Break My Will, it's all symbolism for blackmail, and in the film Bradshaw dies. I'm not going to rehash that last post, but it's critical to understand here, and I've dug up a lot more in the last week. For example, Transformers the movie has music by Vince DiCola, and he was born the same day as Great Balls of Fire was released. Moreover, that film kills Optimus Prime and replaces him with a robot voiced by Judd Nelson. Nelson starred in only one other film that year named Blue City, which co-starred Ally Sheedy. Both films died at the box office. Ally Sheedy was born the same day as Lolita was released, a film about a man who sexually abuses a 12-year-old girl. The film they starred in was Blue City, a film about a man played by Judd Nelson whose sheriff father dies, and he has to rescue the town that got taken over. This is parallel to Judd Nelson's other film Transformers, which involves Nelson's father, Optimus Prime, dying in 1986 and him having to take his place. Having the two stars of this film symbolize blackmail, with the father, as a government sheriff, dying is a symbol of Chernobyl falling. Chernobyl as government-controlled blackmail. The exchange for giving up that process was in cooperation for legal matters and investigating the killers. This is why the son of the sheriff tied to Great Balls of Fire, same symbol that died in Top Gun, which is United States blackmail, partners with Lolita symbolism, Russian government blackmail symbolism, to go after killers and save the town. That wasn't the only major sets of films in 1986 sending comms about this either. For example, you may be aware of Big Trouble in Little China. What was that film about? July 2, 1986. Big Trouble in Little China, semi-truck stolen. August 8, 1986. Transformers movie, semi-truck killed. About a semi-truck driver in a story based on Rosemary's Baby, and what happens to his truck. It gets stolen, and so he has to infiltrate a brothel to free the girls. I.e., freeze the blackmail operations. A symbol just like with Optimus Prime, the same kind of semi-truck that gets killed that year. Just like Transformers and Blue City, this film bombed despite famously being a great film. This is in contrast to films that are famously terrible like Golden Child, released that same year, which had a similar theme but made over $100 million. Let's continue with the third Transformers film for a moment, as the most popular iteration of a comm is usually the most important one. DIA has many variants. For example, India equals India. Notice the character in Transformers 3 that acts as a bodyguard for the man with the former higher than top secret level clearance. He is a master hacker and a combat specialist who identifies his girlfriend as India in a suspicious manner. Notice he hacks Trump Tower hotel surveillance. The reason I am decoding Transformers is I got a request to decode this film, and notice that Chicago Trump Tower plays a prominent role as the villain's base. How is that connected to India? January 3, 2009. Trump Tower Chicago completed plus 17 days till Chicago-based Obama. January 4, 2009. President Bush pet India equals in DIA death Bush. January 20, 2009. Obama inauguration. India, India. Death just before Obama gets in, symbol of Bush leaving power. I've gone over this in several posts. Trump was being used as a safety measure, a third party to keep Bush in check. This is why Apprentice was a huge thing, as it hyped him up for conservatives as the ultimate POTUS. Espousing the precise kind of messaging desired of a leader of the right. The construction began in 2005, which is the same year as Access Hollywood and at the start of his show The Apprentice. Notably, Access Hollywood involved Billy Bush as a way to bring them into it when the scandal would unfold. Another comm tied to countering Bush was Umaga, which strongly ties to Trump as well. Umaga was beaten, with Trump working with Bo. Umaga is pronounced E-U-Mega as Reagan's tagline, but with disgust. June 8, 2009. Umaga Final Day. June 8, 2009. Transformers Revenge of the Fallen debut. Transformers films praise Obama but have a number of insults towards Bush that I'll show later. To sum it up, Transformers symbolize a coordinated effort to spy with the machines representing the tech, but there's a lot more to it than just that. DIA reversed is aid, and maybe invoking the symbol is for a mutual cooperation. Aid in employment in exchange for DIA work in surveillance, kept off the book. Not official work, as the comms make it clear there is a wall of plausible deniability built into it all. Anyway, after Bumblebee is captured, the villains are still watching, and so Bumblebee lies. This is all defining the procedure for volunteers to spy on enemies. To have an official line of intel when the villain can see and say what is expected of them. Keeping surveillance up in such a way that the good guys see everything and yet everything the bad guys see is as though they were fully allied with them. It becomes a trap to ensnare ones in control. Remember that the spy mission began by scouting a riverbed. Symbolism of water equals info, it's a similar point for another episode. They make a new river out of the deception's water. All of it is symbolism for handling information. There are quite a few aspects that this clears up now. For example, the distinction between networks. Notice how Autobots assert that they aren't fighters like the other side is. This clarifies Decepticons are tied to the MK Ops and the Autobots are tied to the basic spy-type surveillance. The goal of that surveillance appears to have been in finding cells using MK Ops to take over other cells and give information on them through the network to the governments of the world. Allowing terrorist attacks to be identified ahead of time before crucial figures are taken out and businesses are overthrown. None of that explains at all why the mascot is a semi-truck, but I am pretty sure I know the point there. The symbol is for product sales. The symbol explains the basic story as at the time there was a war going on vying for market control. It explains why the focus of the 1984 show would be Cybertron and the villain named Megatron. Tron was released just before it and I decoded that film to also be about the electronic war that raged. These toys are another iteration of that war, but they can help us further define what precisely was going on at that time as well as what's been going on recently. These comms have had places in pop culture stretching back from the 80s to the modern day. Now let's try and understand the points in time when Transformers peaked and the history around it. The first peak after having the top toy of 1985, they released a big-budget motion picture. A movie with curious casting choices. One of which was Orson Welles, arguably the greatest director who ever lived for Citizen Kane. This was his last work ever. He performed the villain's voice and then died IRL 5 days after. This is likely another death, as in a message being sent with both the character and the man dying symbolizing some major change. To understand this we have to understand what Orson Welles symbolized. It's notable the film bombed at the box office. Unlike Michael Bay's films which made around $1 billion each, this one lost several million. Notice another casting choice with Leonard Nimoy of all people. Spock lends his voice to a reincarnated Megatron. Both Optimus Prime and Megatron die in the film only for each to be replaced. I find this curious in Spock's case because he had just been resurrected in the Search for Spock, which released while Transformers was being made. So both the villain and hero having comms of death and one of resurrection. To understand these strange choices I need to explain the symbolism of Orson Welles. The guy was famous for Citizen Kane, and he also made War of the Worlds. He was famous pre-World War II, and understanding that timeframe is critical. October 30, 1938. War of the World radio broadcast of an alien attack on CBS radio leads to mass panic. November 1, 1938. Seabiscuit, famous horse of Red, has his legendary win against War Admiral. November 6, 1938. Red Rider, Fighting Cowboy, comics debut starting a craze that would lead to children everywhere buying guns to defend their families. In my horse post I go over it extensively, but the point for here is War of the Worlds was a part of the ops preparing for World War II by conditioning the public to want to fight/protect the country. You can't just flip a switch and make the country agree to war, at least you couldn't in the 1930s in America. 1940, 93% against going to war. 1941, 33% against going to war. 1942, 7% against going to war. This nearly 100% change of heart from against going to war to going to war across the country was due to comms tied to War of the Worlds. It was the test run that demonstrated how people would react to an invasion. The answer was a legendary mass panic to a hoax alien invasion. Proof positive that people would accept even the most ridiculous like so long as it came from the news. In that post I prove this relationship with a bunch of patterns across time, along with Orson Welles and War of the Worlds I demonstrate a relationship with the famous Seabiscuit vs. War Admiral, arguably the most famous horse race ever. The biggest budget horse film of all time was about this same Seabiscuit. July 25, 2003. Iraq first time entering war since World War II. July 25, 2003. Seabiscuit released. There is a lot more to it than this, so check the post titled Big Red Horses, if any of that is confusing. Understanding the symbolism allows us to break down the relationships. In this case, Orson Welles represents international takeover ops. In the Transformers movie we see him forcing Megatron into becoming his tool for this purpose, but we also see another strange storyline that doesn't seem to fit at all with the rest. It's a story about a planet full of shark robots that murder only the innocent. That's a likely symbol for the people in between the top and bottom levels of ops. Orson Welles symbolizes the top, but there are many levels in between the billionaire top and often lunatic drug-addicted bottom that gets manipulated into murder. Shark symbolism is connected to Jaws and is another way to represent murder ops, but not the targeted ones. Check my Spielberg post for more on that. The symbol for a shark is in the hidden from view plus many regrowable teeth, i.e. these are murderers that are expendable and can be grown quickly. They are often deployed with no expectation of hitting a specific target but an expectation of killing and/or causing mayhem. They are activated to create media narratives at a moment's notice to distract the public as well as weakening a society with continued use. The people at the top want killers and it gets relayed through several layers until we get to this. Before Orson Welles is defeated, these are dismantled. This happens through a metal T-Rex Autobot that declares himself king and then ordering the shark bots to turn on their master. T-Rex symbolism is for the assembly line and car industry. Check my intro post for more on that one, and so in context the message is about market control. It ties into Japan overtaking the US auto industry around this time. You may remember my Top Gun decode as it involved a deal to get out of football and the tech industry. The Transformers movie came out within 2 months of that one. May 12, 1986. Top Gun includes famous volleyball scene. May 12, 1986. Trial opens USFL vs NFL, end of USFL. August 8, 1986. Transformers movie. Having Top Gun play volleyball was a symbol of exiting that industry for a side, and Transformers seems to have been a counterpart to these comms as it dealt with the tech industry. Effectively throughout this year there were a host of comms about Mossad/US/Rus giving up territory in tech industries. Don't misunderstand here, this doesn't mean Reagan was some kind of big bad, it likely means the various non-MK groups around the world were saying that, if you want our help, stop fighting us for control, and so an agreement was made to stop fighting, everybody work together against the real terrorists. This might be why the film has Optimus Prime the semi-truck dying. The symbol of market control gone and replaced by a new leader. Passing on his leadership to a child bot which then destroys a greater threat. A greater threat that forces others into submission by force. In exchange for no longer fighting to control tech as Megatron, the various parties agreed to cooperate on intel work and other things. This might be best understood through DARE. The Reagan push against drugs. A program that began in 1986 and, coincidentally, had 2 different songs built into Transformers with that as a title. One of which by an artist named Bush. Like the Vice President, which at the time was a shorthand for the government of Reagan. In both cases the symbolism is referencing the overarching comms about anti-drug use named DARE. Why DARE? October 16, 1981. FDA approves Pharmacia and the highly addictive Xanax. October 16, 1981. DARE studio album by Human League. May 16, 1980. Devo Freedom of Choice Whippet Devolution. May 16, 1980. Travelogue Human League album before DARE Only After Dark. Symbolism of DARE was originally for getting kids more addicted to drugs. Notice their early works. Their prior album involved abortion symbolism. Then another one on the same day as de-evolution. Symbolism of making people dumber and drug addicted, as I've gone into before. Abortion symbolism is a symbol for child sacrifice and is tied to parents exchanging their children for profit by having local networks of clowns brainwash them into killers. The push at the time against this was for investigating MK locally, and it ties into the ops going on before the deal was made. This does not mean all the people that flipped were MK, in fact this suggests there were many factions. The child sacrificing ones were not looked upon well but were feared as they took over various cells. Fear prevented action against them, and so they kept growing until the various factions began working together. So what was the purpose of invoking Stan Bush in relation to Dare? The origin of Stan Bush's song happens to be Iron Eagle. A film I decoded in my last post as a parody of Top Gun comms. On the surface it looks patriotic, but when I dug into the comms the intention was clearly to be insulting. Specifically in terms of joking about Bush's connection with blackmail. Hence the symbol of, "You got the touch." Check my last post for more on that, as a key part of the change involved the Mossad side selling $500 million in hotels. This may be why it and Iron Eagle largely failed at the box office, while Top Gun, which was the first big collaboration of Air Force and Hollywood, became the biggest movie draw of the year. The other Stan Bush song, The Touch, is featured prominently in the Wahlberg film Boogie Nights. A film about a drug-addicted porn star with HIV played by the main star of Transformers 5 and 6. September 11, 1997. Senate votes to repeal the $50 billion tax break for the tobacco industry that was slipped into the tax cut legislation just. September 11, 1997. Boogie Nights Mark Wahlberg film about drug addiction. I believe this connection is in marking the event with the tobacco industry. I suspect the fines for the tobacco industry is tied to their involvement in creating addictions, which is a major accelerant for kids on the wrong path. Also note Boogie Nights begins in 1977. In the first Transformers movie the main character uses a 1977 Camaro. This focus on 1977 is a symbol of the Q clearance changes, a transition of ops into the private sector with mass-market computers. I talk about this practically 17 times a post, so let's move on. With that in mind, let's actually get into that film. Transformers 1. We have to understand why Transformers would be invoked in such a grandiose fashion in 2007. The original show, as I covered above, involved symbolism of spies hiding in plain sight and using technology/recording scouting in conjunction with the Pentagon. When dealing with spies, which are the official two top agencies? USA and Israel. This is highly relevant because the 1986 movie focused on a transition of power in the Transformers universe. Optimus Prime dies and passes on leadership to a character named Hot Rod. Note who voices Hot Rod. That'd be someone Jewish. Now I could call this a coincidence except for the fact that the star of the newer Transformer films just so happens to be half and half. Jewish and Christian origin and descended from clowns. Baptized and had a bar mitzvah. This is a perfect symbol of cooperation between Mossad/CIA. The character he plays has the same last name as the child that piloted Optimus Prime's replacement. Witwiki. In the original this defined a transitional point that was also covered in Top Gun. The symbol was of Mossad/Bush/US military affiliated transitioning away from market control in exchange for cooperation from cells in feeding information about potential threats like terrorists. Trying to identify problems before they begin. The newer films mirror this, as well as the cooperation between US military and Autobot, Japanese robot, is a key plot element. When I look into soldiers used, a symbol pops out. September 28, 1998, Pokémon US release, beginning of the largest media franchise of all time. September 29, 1998, Tyrese album Soldier from Transformers. Japan is 17 hours ahead, so business hours are plus 1 day ahead, and so the game was released the same day. I already decoded Pokémon as a symbol for Japanese data collection, but with this I can now connect it to the black ops in government. The calm of using Robert Epps releasing a song at the same time as Pokémon Red and Blue. His name being a tie, tied to X, and notice the lead single is about having someone study him spying. This cooperation in exchange for product success is a similar relationship Nintendo gained for the original NES. Notice General Motors getting the product placement and the military helping with the film. Often ops are tied to the birth of babies as a symbol, and in this film it begins with a military unit talking about eating swamp gators followed by a newborn baby of the military. That's not the official start, the film begins with a monologue. Optimus Prime describes how the war between the factions of Transformers are over a cube. A cube that gave life to them. The symbolism as we already went over is of resource control. The Energon Cube Wars, which in this context is things like selling electronics and cars. Film begins with an evil robot stealing classified files. The goal is to figure out who is doing this and why, and of course the answer is needing a human alliance with the Japanese toy, Transformers, just as the prior media did. This transitions us to the main character. He talks about the 1897 Arctic Shelf expedition whereas we learn later his grandfather met the alien robots. So what happened in 1897? Well, with just that clue it would be tough to be certain, but luckily he gives a couple of additional clues. He begins trying to sell his grandfather's things, and specifically he begins saying words that the audience laughs at being sexual. Tools for semen and selling a sextant. With those 2 points in mind the symbolism becomes likely that of the proto-Mossad/CIA feud that was going on at the time tied to the Astor family. 1897 is when Astor built his famous hotel tied to early blackmailing. It's also when a failed attempt to get to the Arctic by balloon happened. I've gone over this feud in several posts. It involves Astor who had blackmailed much of Congress standing strong against the forces trying to give America a central bank. This feud leads to Astor being murdered on the Titanic. This mass murder is the kind of act to be prevented by intel collection, at least in theory. Notice he asks people to buy his Arctic Circle compass like the CIA symbol. He also wears an alien symbol on his shirt. These are the kinds of combinations of apparel plus speech that someone who is comms aware would use to broadcast that they were comms aware and looking for ops. This leads to his father bringing him to a clown named Bumblebee to buy an alien car. He ends up getting a 1977 Camaro instead of the original Beetle that Bumblebee was based on. I already went over the symbolism there, but just to remind. Both are symbols of data collection. Critically right after this scene and he gets his new Camaro/Beetle, we get a scene of the Pentagon hiring high school students. Like Witwicky. Recruited to help with foreign interception. Signals analysis. I keep talking about the military cooperation, but always keep in mind the time frame. This was 2007 right at the end of the Bush administration. The relationship between who is behind these comms and their representation of the governments of the world will be educational as I go through these films. Witwicky uses the name Ladiesman 217 to sell his glasses. This is a symbol of 217 equals to 17/Q, selling his glasses being selling his eyes. This is the wink needed to set up a comms channel. He watches a small Mexican dog that is addicted to drugs, and has severe mental problems. A crackhead that is constantly under emotional stress due to a mother. He also has a leg cast and lives in a penthouse. The symbols here are of watching a brainwashed alien by foreign agents. Making it a Mexican dog gives it the illegal alien symbol, and defining it as a crackhead that is stuck in place with emotional problems is defining someone he has watch over that is tied to the MK world. This is the point of him with a Camaro. The original documented MK surveillance was done by a Cameron. His psychic driving experiments. 1957 Cam becomes CSU, Sheep plus Camera, Colorado. 1977 QDOE sets up waste area there. 1957 Allen Memorial Institute MK Ultra experiments begin by Ewan, Sheep, Cameron, camera on. Monitoring MK experiments with cameras, a system that, as I often discuss, changed dramatically in 1977. Hence the 1977 Camaro. I cover this so frequently, but I'm always finding new aspects of it. For example, just this week I learned Jimmy Carter had the code name Lockmaster, and nobody knows why. The answer is likely question a way to create a better lock. After getting his alien Camaro, Witwicky drives to the beach party that he wasn't invited to. The public lake to climb a tree. Water equals info. This is symbolism of trying to gain a connection to the top of the comms world. The lake being the public comms in the media, and in creating that web page he attempts to get involved. Megan Fox symbolizing the Mossad media connections. May 16, 1986. Famous return to life of Bobby Ewing. May 16, 1986. Megan Fox. June 13, 2021. Midnight in the Switchgrass. Megan Fox and current husband Machine Gun Kelly meet. True story of a dangerous serial killer. June 13, 2021. Likud loses Israel. I have no idea if this is connected, but it struck me as odd. Born the same day as the famous return to life of Bobby Ewing in Dallas. A show I've shown in other posts was used to represent the campaign against Bush. A campaign that didn't exactly end, but did change forms a few times. The largest of which was around the same time as Top Gun/Chernobyl. He had tried to join football and failed. This relationship between Witwicky and football in relation to Megan Fox is important. February 27, 1995. Stapleton Airport, Denver, closed down for DIA. February 27, 1995. Cotton Eye Joe, Sex and Violins. August 12, 1994. Cotton Eye Joe single. August 12, 1994. NFL debut on Fox with Denver Broncos. This football connection can be traced back to the origins. Transformers are by some measures knockoffs of Gundam, a series that began in 1979. Gundams are inspired by Starship Troopers. November 5, 1959. Starship Troopers. November 5, 1959. AFL announced with 8 teams to compete with NFL. I think Starship Troopers was a marker for the AFL and represented the collaboration between various industrial giants in the USA, most notably of oil. They pooled resources and achieved various goals, much like the NFL does with its comms. It being the origin of Gundam means that those giant robots were the equivalent in Japan, with the various industrial giants like Toyota and Sony coming together and sending sports comms, likely with baseball, to mark progress in goals set out. This means Transformers is that same entity tied to Gundam cooperating internationally with the USA and defines that cooperation in relation to markets. This further explains the nature of the conflict with Transformers and the Reagan administration. The Transformers were symbolizing the partnership tied to the major football teams, corporations, and international partners in Japan. Meanwhile, Reagan/Bush were tied into the USFL, which was feuding with the NFL/AFL. Robert Byrd began leading in 1977 and introduced measures that killed all funding attempts using the SR-71 model to send hundreds of millions into the private sector through contracts. The money which would then be used for ops. Kind of funny when I read it like that, as it almost make Byrd sound like a hero, but that's the opposite of the truth. These kinds of taxpayer robbing funding ops would have been immoral in a normal world, but in the world we live in? I'm well aware Reagan and many others were trying to fight a behemoth that held the world in a vice grip. Without them to keep it in check, there would have been a far worse outcome, as we can see with Astor. Speaking of which, it's just like Astor with blackmail. Yes, that's not a moral thing to do, but given it's what kept America away from central banks. And as soon as they got rid of him, they threatened Congress with the same if they didn't submit. Check intro page. Then they plunged the country into the Great Depression, which killed millions and set the world back practically to the Dark Ages. How should we judge morality in this context? It's complicated, and I don't have enough facts yet to truly judge. I suspect the world has a lot of growing up to do, and so let's hurry up and learn as much as we can. Anyway, the point with the Transformers' origin tied to the AFL plus Japan is in two large groups working together, including multiple networks of spies scattered around the country. The point of this cooperation is in an effort to root out various hostile cells scattered around the country. The precise nature of these larger cells is not just tech companies, but media conglomerates tied to blackmail used for control. For example, the biggest star of the early AFL was Joe Namath. NFL famously lost for the first time to the AFL with him as quarterback assuring a victory in Super Bowl III. You can see he is from Beaver Falls, symbol for what? Megan Fox rejects the football star and begins a relationship with Wiki. The symbolism for Megan Fox changing affiliations is tied to Fox News in relation to the president. Crucially, this film is very negative on Bush and very positive on Obama. I'll get more into Witwicky symbolism later, but for now we see the president as an idiot here and wanting a ding-dong. She laments her job in bringing ding-dongs and calls it gross. Symbolism of ho-ho and ding-dong, calm sex joke. Notice the phallic shape and white center of a ho-ho. They find Witwicky's glasses, as in they see him sending comms and go after him. This is the danger of entering the comms world, as people can become targets of other people with different affiliations. Especially if they are monitoring groups tied to terrorism. Now we have to look at the layers. Whenever we talk about alien robots, there may be a counterpart that defines the real symbol. So here Witwicky gets harassed unduly by the police in ever more irrational form. The cop is trying to arrest him for no reason. The next scene, a cop tries to murder Witwicky while chasing his Bumblebee. The symbolism is the same. The police harassing him. The police officer is an alien, as in someone foreign, loyal and taking orders to put pressure on Witwicky. In the film, having the harassing police officer informs the comms-aware audience of what precisely is being represented. It's much like my Hansel and Gretel decode, if you remember that, the way a story can give the clues necessary to explain a symbol and then transition from real to fantasy and back again to tell a story with symbols. Note specifically calling it a Japanese robot, which of course is the origin of the toy, but also the method of data movement. Moreover, it speaks only via radio. The symbolism being the comms sent to coordinate. His transformer utilizes coordination with the public comms going on all the time, the same ones I'm discussing. The goal of which is to identify and mitigate the threat of aliens arriving. Asteroids smashing into sports stadium symbolism is a foreign ops arriving. They define the all-spark as a way to build an army. This is the relationship between business and ops, how selling product is channeled into ops. Some with good intentions and others with bad, some with the goal of taking over more and more industry by threat. Threats using killers/corrupt police and anything else that can be weaponized. This was 2007 at the tail end of Bush. This doesn't mean these military cooperation comms are pro-Bush. They clearly aren't. You can see it in a number of scenes, like this scene where they recruit a hacker who has an anti-Bush playing card deck. Megan Fox is the real clue to unlocking the purpose of these comms in relation to the media. Notice she starred as a reporter for 2 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies, which along with many other clues I'll go over make it clear she symbolizes Fox News. The biggest clue is how she was fired in 2009 from Transformers. September 2009, Megan Fox calls Michael Bay Hitler and gets fired from Transformers franchise. October 2009, after months of skirmishes, war breaks out between Fox News and Obama administration. Before the actual news, it plays out in a play to choreograph what will happen. Notice how after Megan Fox called Bay Hitler, she not only got fired, she was roasted by the crew and media publications. All of this informing the people behind and above Fox News what they can expect. It's also crucial it happens this way, as it's possible they might create an international war if certain lines are crossed. What do I mean? Notice this war began due to a Wonderland interview where she calls the director Hitler. Megan Fox begins talking about Michael Bay sexualizing underage girls. This is the retort, as in if you do X, we do Y. As in exposing the perversions if they get targeted for violence. Notice how Megan Fox right after this she got robbed by the bling ring, and the film she took part in bombed. Fox News after this point in time began getting hit with a barrage of media trying to downplay their position as news. However, these points are relevant in future movies more than now. This is still the first film in 2007, and so the Megan Fox plus Michael Bay relationship is at its peak. The government investigating Witwicky pulls the Bushes out of the ground. This was around the time of the transition away from Bush as his numbers hit the 20%. Approval rating. This is the point of having Megan Fox as an ally, as those low approval numbers represented Fox turning on Bush. Without conservative media, the numbers plummeted. This was the handover from Bush to Obama, much like from Bush 1 to Clinton. This didn't last, as once Obama was in, Fox went hard right, which is what the whole feud above was about. Anyway, next up, the secret government offers Witwicky a ho-ho. They also give a threat of locking them up forever and using Megan Fox's father's prison record as leverage. This is something the Autobots get upset by and fight against. The symbolism of the father of Fox, a man she says she hates, is likely the idea of dragging people like Bush into court like they did at the tail end of H.W. Bush's term through Iran-Contra. They never did that for Bush's scandals, even though I'm pretty sure there was a plan to do it. This may be why after Bush left he never said a negative word against Obama. This also might be drawing a line to keep associates out of the punishments. This is why MK Ops involve children as brainwashers to other children so as to avoid the surveillance and punishment. They make a deal with the government to expunge their criminal record and keep Fox's father free. The agent informs Witwicky that all modern technology began from Transformer tech. This is a reference to the tech war in the 80s that drove all of those inventions and was fought with the same symbolism tied to the original cartoon. Mossad/CIA. That spark gets further defined as tied to 1913. This is likely a representation to central banks and funding with the Federal Reserve. The way to create new robots equals funding ops with unlimited budget. The exact thing central banks bring to the table, in exchange for endless massive inflation, of course. A standoff between the DIA and CIA symbolism over whether or not to allow Witwicky to continue. Fox drives, note the mic/microphone towing service with Fox. Comms of Fox, cooperation to send comms. Megatron gives an offer of becoming a pet, as that is what being the spoils of a takeover would bring. The first film ends with Bumblebee deciding to stay with Sam. Witwicky equals surveillance ops to continue. It also gives a mission statement: the Autobots will continue watching over humans in secret and helping new aliens take refuge. That pretty much runs down the entire op. They also state no evidence will be left behind of the villain as they dump him in the Mariana Trench. This could be as simple as defining just how secret they are being, but it could also represent whatever criminal act defined before being hidden permanently. Whatever was being threatened against the father of Fox. Transformers 2, Revenge of the Fallen. Second film opens with 17K BC. This is another Q-com. A way to signify the story about to be told is something secret and hidden in symbols. A story about people being hunted by tigers. Tiger symbolism is being hunted by the MK Ops, so that fits what was going on with Transformer comms. The joint military ops continue in China. Data is routed through China and stored in NK. Notice the choice of code names with Seahawks. This is a possible reference to the Seattle sports ownership of Nintendo. Earlier I connected the success of Nintendo's Pokémon to these military cooperations, and this would be an extension of that. A symbol that the US forces were coordinating with Japanese ones to handle data in such a way that they wouldn't get touched by data laws. It's the same logic as Five Eyes, which involves countries exchanging spying on each other as it bypasses local laws, and they aren't touched by the country they spy on. This brings us to the main character, Sam Witwicky. Remember that his comms are tied to these joint operations. And his story here begins with him watching his dogs have sex. This is a likely reference to the pacification plus surveillance ops using pornography. The point of there being so much pornography free online is to create a way to monitor and give destructive people a different outlet for spending time than destroying things IRL. This is why there are legions of porn sites that are free. This is why in the conclusion of the film the goal is to The goal is to shoot a missile into the testicles of a giant robot. Yes, that's what happens in this film. This is the last film with Megan Fox in it. They plan on having an internet date with webcams, which is another likely symbol for creating the pacification using sex sites. She has a father that gets a deal to get out of prison named Papa John, and while I don't fully get this reference, I do find it interesting the real Papa John's pizza originated from selling a Camaro in the 80s. In 2009, same year as this film, he bought the Camaro back. I suspect the meaning to that is in getting more involved in surveillance. It's hard to read, but there's no way it's a coincidence we have Papa John in this billion-dollar movie starring a Camaro, and the real-life famous Papa John buys a famous Camaro that started his shop. If this post wasn't already running late, I'd dig deeper into that. Things escalate with a scene that makes no sense without comms. Bumblebee saves their lives from evil robots, so you would expect him to be appreciated and people desperate to not let him leave, but because while saving them he damaged the yard, everyone is upset at him. The mother explicitly says, "I cannot live with a psychotic alien in my garage." The irony is it is only without him that they would have that problem. You could call this lazy writing, but this is a billion-dollar film, and it's oozing with comms, and with comms this oddly illogical sentiment has a logical base. I believe this represents the ops at the lower level is in having families house MK subjects that are psychotic. Thus what we are actually seeing is a mess being created by housing a dangerous individual. The family want these MK subjects gone but are convinced to let him stay in exchange for government funding. This fits what I know of the MK system, as only a certain percentage of MK families succeeded in making a killer. The ones that failed would then try and have the child die. I can personally attest to this as I was an MK victim as well, and when my programming failed they set up situations for me to die. I lucked out and survived, and more attempts were made to program, and for several years it became a campaign to either turn me into a psychopath or get me to kill myself. At a certain point in time all of this stopped, and I've come to realize it was because an agreement had been made with the government. I can't talk extensively about this yet, but I believe these comms are a reflection of that kind of circumstance. It's a tricky thing on what to do with dangerous people who have no one due to a life of abuse, and the only people that can even be involved with them are people already inside that system. Anyway, she says, if the government's paying, I want a pool and a hot tub. The symbol there is likely in creating a network for communications for people with these situations so as to get help as necessary. Witwicky gets his family to accept the car surveillance and leaves to do his own thing at college. This is akin to someone who has been looking after an MK subject since childhood and trying now to separate. Many of the people involved were the original handlers, and after a length of time they would leave. Often the ops were symbolized with an adopted dog, as the timeframe expected would be in the years. So when the dog died, or they got rid of them, the contract would in effect have run its course. I can personally attest to this point, as well as my circumstances correlated not once but twice with adopted dogs of my handlers. Witwicky goes to college with a website entrepreneur, one known for kitten calendars, and has a wall plastered with young women. This website developer is focused on a new conspiracy blog, and I believe these two ventures of his, i.e. conspiracy blog or kitten calendars, are the two paths being outlined for job opportunities in comms here. One being part of narrative control and the other online addiction pushing. Witwicky gets hired by him, and this is a good point to discuss the symbol of Sam Witwicky. I already discussed his Mossad plus clown, but why that specific name of Witwicky? The official reason is the last name comes from the original family in the Transformers cartoon, but then why did that cartoon choose it? Given how big those cartoon comms were, there is surely a purpose to something that would be repurposed here. Given the original cartoon's connection with intel agencies, among the largest projects at the time was the proto-internet. Same time the Transformers movie hit, the CIA-owned Finders cult, noted in FBI doc above, was using the proto-internet to coordinate child abuse with 1977 computers. Computers released the same day as the MK Ultra hearing in the Senate, as well as the birth of Q clearance. I discuss this point not because I'm tying the Transformers comm to perversion, but actually just to demonstrate the internet was a thing in the mid-1980s in a very limited form. Enough so that MK kids could be coordinated through it globally. Outside of child abuse, most of the use in the early internet was through universities sharing databases of information. Given Transformers comms are tied to investigating, I suspect their contributions online would be along those database sharing lines. Do you know the history of Wikipedia? It ties into selling toy cars / real car dealerships and immature sex jokes. Before I learned the history of Transformers, I thought WitWiki might be a symbol for Wikipedia. Obviously, the pedia is a symbol for encyclopedia, but that still leaves the wiki. A name defined in modern times as shorthand for a type of website. It's literally the definition. So is that a coincidence? Maybe. WitWiki 2W's worldwide symbolism. WitWiki tries to convince his new roommate that the aliens being real is fake news. This is akin to what Wikipedia does by reinforcing the media narrative, and I suspect this is a large part of the point. One of the jobs offered in ops at this time was in getting people online to set up sites to reinforce the narrative and dispel conspiracy theories. This goal of WitWiki to get people to ignore aliens, notice the mother comes by with pot brownies. Symbol of calling any actual truth discarded as pot-fueled insanity, the conspiracy label. This is similar to the comms I went over involving Bill and Ted, and understanding the two comms in relation to one another unlocks even more. Comms of this film are silly intentionally and involve the story of history being told by stoner stereotypes. February 17, 1989. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, phone booth equals 56K connection symbol. March 12, 1989. World Wide Web official birth. The movie came out just as the push for the masses to get involved with the internet did. The actual masses didn't get the internet for a while yet, but this is outlining the way to handle it as it does. A way to say, don't worry about people learning the truth, we can just set the narrative on history. That they didn't want accuracy but instead a brain-dead retelling of history utilizing the narrative rather than anything substantive that might unlock a path into the comms world. These internet ops were international, and understanding tech partnerships around this time is useful. The most relevant being in 1988 when Sony and Nintendo began their technology partnership, and this is strongly tied to the sequel to Bill and Ted. They ally with two small aliens named Station that can fuse into one large being. Check Red Pill post for more. This was the marker for PlayStation original add-on that Sony went all in on, but Nintendo dropped out of the partnership after it was unveiled. This explains why we still see the comms throughout this film of it, as it only collapsed after. I'm not going to rehash the entire relationship, but there is a crucial reason I bring it up now. Shia LaBeouf was born in 1986 around the same time as Top Gun and all the other Transformers comms, but when was WitWiki born? September 13, 1991. Jerry Boy / Smart Ball Pokemon predecessor by Sony / Nintendo. September 13, 1991. Sam WitWiki born. That'd be in 1991 on the exact same date of a Sony plus Nintendo partnership game called Jerry Boy / Smart Ball, made by the same company that made Pokemon right afterwards. The biggest mass media franchise of all time. Jerry symbolism is for a Jerry coupling, as in two parties working together. The game involves camera symbolism as well, but the main point is just like with the PlayStation symbol, this was to be two parties working together. Having Shia be born on that day is representative of this merger attempt. Anyway, notice the asteroids coming in that last bit, chasing after WitWiki, leading to a Decepticon taking the form of a young girl seducing him. Symbolism of a spy trying to get close to people involved. A brief scene with Megatron showing how his hatchlings die without Energon, symbol of being unable to create new companies without funding. Then we get WitWiki in college learning about Virgo, the Virgin, and Orion the Great Hunter, that's the original name for Optimus, and a plot point later for how the pyramids were built to be lined to it. The meaning of invoking it here in the same breath as the Virgin is in defining the protective entity as Optimus Prime and the blackmail ops as overarching system to create stars. He defines the stars like diamonds and with sex talk. Witwiki interrupts with a monologue on how Einstein was wrong because he wasn't considering dimensions. Nobody ever talks about the other 17 dimensions. 17/Q. Of course nobody talks about those as the symbolism is for the Q level ops. He begins seeing Q as soon as he touches it. The meaning of Einstein being wrong in relation to dimensions is because of how threats come from different dimensions, i.e. the 17/Q landscape that only began post-1977. Also Megan Fox catches a robot with rat traps and rips his eye out. Given the symbolism at play of controlling the narrative, this seems to represent getting the narrative under control when someone rats and risks exposure. Witwiki begins talking about how the worst song keeps repeating in his head as he talks about kitten calendars over and over again. He does this just as a model that already failed at seducing him once tries again. Which instantly involves the young girl growing a tail and ruining his relationship with Megan Fox. The point is likely in blackmail ops, and how people are targeted to get them under thumb. The repeating, kitten calendars, is how these weaponized women are used to control people and move from one puppeteer to the next. Making a married man cheat for example and then threatening to ruin the marriage with it. It's played as a joke with the conspiracy blogger states, "The aliens want me cause of my site," but given his site tries to expose alien conspiracy, this is correct. His tag-along story with Wiki as his employee represents finding the people poised to define the truth online and driving them. All of this is done critically as Megatron kills Optimus and then his allies begin exposing the Earth people to the truth of their existence. Thus the battle here is of evil aliens giving intel on truth like the fact that aliens, i.e. spies, are real and using it to control the masses. Wikipedia and conspiracy blog sites are the weapon used to fight. Note as they expose the truth a clown/mime invades the space of Witwiki the father tied to spying. Since Optimus the Protector is dead, they have to fix him. They follow the symbols to fix Optimus Prime. This leads them to a Blackbird SR-71 spy plane. The only one that can translate symbols. I hope you remember the decode I gave above about the SR-71 and how it was tied to blackmail ops. This is in effect activating a blackmailed sleeper high up the command structure of the other side. Kind of like when many of Trump's allies turned on him early in his presidency. Changing sides, and Megan Fox lands on the conspiracy blogger's testicles. This Autobot affiliation change symbol stems from the original show with one that changed sides in the earliest episodes. It involved the Aurora Borealis at the Arctic Circle, which I suspect is tied to seeing something beautiful hidden in secret information, as in finding someone deep in the enemy territory that can be switched. Destroying a sun symbol is going after funding. This is why Optimus as the symbol for product sales is dead and needs to be revived. He is also the protector/hunter because those ops pay for these kinds of ops. Orion's belt, and bringing him back with pixie dust. Define pixie. And this is right as they remove the largest villain by literally shooting a rocket at its robot testicles. I went over this before, but it's notable that this robot then sacrifices its life to give his equipment to Optimus Prime. The climax involves attacking the robot testicles. Optimus is revived as Witwiki sticks the giant phallic object into Optimus. I remember a joke about this being his robot penis told years ago, and given all the other sexual connotations, I find this hypothesis just barely plausible enough to discuss. Especially since afterwards the Decepticon tied to blackmail gives him his parts to fly to the stars. And that's the second film. Time to move on to the most successful one. I covered in the intro section, but there is still more to go over. Transformers 3, Dark of the Moon. This is the last one with Witwiki as main character. It begins with a retelling of the moon landing. That in fact it was all an operation to investigate a crashed UFO on the moon. Check my blog's intro post for a decode of what was going on there. The symbol here is likely much like in the last film in terms of pushing the narrative. This will make sense after I decode the next set of comms. Witwiki has a new girlfriend named Carly, and he is unemployed. The point is in an avenue for employment. Keep in mind under Obama job market crashed. Trump brought it back, but back in 2011 it was on its way out. For comms-aware people this would also be problematic, and that's the point of these comms. Sam's new girlfriend Carly, well, just so happens there's a show that debuted at the same time as the first Transformers named Sam and Carly. A show about kids setting up a popular internet show, and likely that show from the beginning was meant as a companion piece for Transformers. Carly is the name of the original heroine of Transformers, so it works both ways, and it being about Sam plus Carly making an internet show directly parallels what we see in the films for comms. Notice other winks like the special I in the kitten calendars of Transformers and how Sam plus Cat starred in the sequel series. If you've read my intro post you already know of a prominent job they had posted for creating internet shows, one relating to the other big Hasbro property My Little Pony. I decoded an extensive set of comms that made it clear the goal was in creating a community of adult male fans from the start. Obviously they couldn't outright say they wanted to do this or else it would fail, so it became a surprise. Check the intro if you want to read that decode. It's a strong decode with no room for doubt as the symbolism can't be interpreted any other way than the way I do, and the dates line up perfectly. I bring it up now as it helps clarify the types of jobs available for comms-aware people starting out. Likely the next generation kids needing to begin somewhere. With the job market dead everywhere but online, that's where we see comms giving the path. What was desired in return? The Transformers were raiding Carly's underwear drawer. This is an extension of the last film's comms, as in taking custody of a brainwashed individual and keeping them under eye. Giving otherwise dangerous people less dangerous hobbies like porn addictions or Farmville. So the Transformers work with the military at various illegal nuclear sites. This escalates when they get to Chernobyl, which I discussed early in the post. I also went into how they replaced Optimus Prime with Judd Nelson, Hot Rodimus / Blue City. This was a likely symbol for the law enforcement cooperation in exchange for giving up tech markets and the hotels for cooperation. Hot Rod protects the child who eventually dons and learns his father's armor, all leading to Hot Rod replacing Optimus Prime. The symbol of Megatron is defined in the hostile takeover ops, and this I suspect initially lumped the government together with the killers. This is a natural conclusion based on the fact that those MK ops did have an origin tied to government funding in the 50s, though really it dates back far earlier. Either way they did utilize those techniques for a period of time. This is why we have the symbolism of not just Optimus Prime being replaced but Megatron as well. Replaced with Leonard Nimoy in 1986 to work with Judd Nelson to destroy the greater threat of Orson Welles forcing people to work as his assassins. They free the shark planet. They also make friends with another initially hostile race voiced by a member of Monty Python's Flying Circus. Monty Python is a symbol for the UK spy network. Seeing the full Monty Python, Snake, a comm I went over before in my Seattle post. The symbol is of the comms network cooperation, specifically an agreement to see the full Snake, i.e. having a view of every level of the cells tied to ops that bleed into MK/murder ops. The deal in specific terms is in various cells helping with intel for the government, and they promise to report on any that engage in murder ops. They ensure this through monitoring, and this is the deal in exchanging monitoring for work in ops with the government approval, not going after them legally. Hence, you get ship if I get trip. Same name as the Transformer that switches from Decepticon to Autobot in the first 3 films and becomes the pet of the Megan Fox and Shia through all of them. As a final point, I already covered part of Judd Nelson's as it is tied to the Great Balls of Fire song, but why that name? I'm not sure about Judd, but I do know that these comms have another famous Nelson tied to them. Notice his name is Fox and a football coach in his most prominent TV role, and of course I already decoded Poltergeist as it represented the family tied to Mossad that was losing the war in both football, USFL, and the tech war with Atari/Nintendo. Check my Seattle post for more on that, but the symbol of Nelson in these contexts represent the family affiliated with the Mossad side and/or Bush/Reagan administration. It's only with Top Gun that an alliance forms in 1986, and specifically for the purpose of fighting the larger threat of takeovers. You have these various parties blackmailing people, but you have these competing groups using killers to force the blackmailing people into submission and control. These aren't mutually exclusive, but in broad strokes they define different ops run by different people that have different approaches to control. Both methods date back a long way. I've gone through how this dates back to Alice in Wonderland if not further, but that point of time is a good one to understand the modern era of it. The symbol of a young girl being put to sleep and having an adventure. This was right after the medical means of putting a girl to sleep for surgery had been invented. Water equals info and frozen water is symbolism for unmoving information. A symbol of blackmail. Alice equals all ice. 1848 Hannah, first chloroform death 15-year-old girl. 1857 First domestic freezer, ice becomes a luxury for the rich after this point. 1865 Alice in Wonderland. The first death a 15-year-old girl named Hannah, which explains the symbol of Hannah as it's the first cover-up of sexual assault on a child using sedation techniques. These ops do overlap in a key way as people can be turned into killers using blackmail. This is what killed JFK as I go over in a number of posts, but this week one of my readers pointed out a connection this week with Alice in Wonderland. That it was named by the same guy behind Our American Cousin, the play used to kill Abraham Lincoln. This I speculate implies they pressured Booth with blackmail to act. October 15, 1858. Our American Cousin debut play used to kill Lincoln. October 16, 1858. Famous chess game, the opera game Morphy wins by sacrificing/mating on the 17th move. October 21, 1858. Oldest football club published rules responsible for drawing up club's rules of play. Taking the king, chess symbol equals takeover symbolism. The point for now is a secret war going on with spies being killed. Witwiki gets a job for a company contracted by DARPA, LifeLog/Facebook, and NASA. 17/Q billion in profit. Meet someone making sex jokes as Deep Throat, which itself was a porn movie and the origin of those comms. The original point was in using blackmailed people to destroy Nixon, I suspect. Jerry, another Jerry coupling comm gets removed. Witwiki meets up with the military after his co-workers are attacked and learns of the space bridge. Fox News is a part of the film with Bill O'Reilly acting as a cartoon villain. This may parallel the nature of Fox News as it had been partially controlled. It's the same reason Megan Fox was said to have schizophrenia, and the same reason Fox News was so perplexingly schizophrenic about Trump/Obama. Having one program praise him and the next curse. A result of competing interests in control. This might be why Bill O'Reilly was quickly fired when Trump took control, but that's highly speculative as I haven't dug into it at all. Notice the secret agent helper calls his girlfriend India. This point by itself is treated as a joke, but there's a deep point to it as I covered in the early part of the post. That it represents affiliation. Witwiki becomes a spy just as the early Transformers did with the same character. His office is in Trump Tower and makes a major part of the climax of the film. The point with him as the human leader under the Decepticons is likely in having controlled opposition. The actor playing him is Dempsey, which I take to mean that Boxer was likely notable for throwing fights. This helps clarify why the villains are so much more effective in this film than the others, as what is being choreographed is both sides of a play. There is a deeper level in having Leonard Nimoy act as a double-agent villain. Remember that this Transformers film is the biggest of all of them in success and had Leonard Nimoy of all people as the villains. He also played the double-agent villain in the 1986 as the reincarnation of Megatron that tries to join forces with the Autobots. Note this same year Nimoy directed the most successful Star Trek film until the 2000s. This was the final part of a trilogy that began with Wrath of Khan, a film that involved Spock dying and then being resurrected just like in Transformers. These comms are all connected and tied to things going on with the tech world. So, what was the comm of Wrath of Khan? It was released the same day as Poltergeist and within one day of the introduction of the D+ shape pad. I already decoded poltergeist as a symbol for Atari being destroyed in my Forrest Gump post. The cross-shaped pad of Nintendo was a symbol of funding. There was a famous story with Poltergeist as well involving directors, as Steven Spielberg secretly directed it but couldn't officially do so because of contracts. The following two films involved Leonard Nimoy being placed in the director's seat. I don't fully understand, but I do get the gist of some of it. Note the stories involved. Invoking Khan ties into a Star Trek episode tied to terrorist sleepers that try to overthrow. Spock in a prior Star Trek Decode I covered had symbolism tied both to technology and child psychology. A method of brainwashing children into an anti-government perspective. Thus having Spock die and then return to modern Earth in 1986 alongside the Top Gun symbolism suggests this was originally another part of the cooperation with the military comms. In the new iteration it is inverted as this was Obama's government. Effectively it intends on having people loyal to the new Obama regime and recreates the same comms that coordinated this effort in the past. As in rejecting the Tea Party movement and Fox News and everything else that tried to take a bite out of Obama. That's my current theory anyway on why Leonard Nimoy returns as a Transformers villain and takes over the Decepticons. Some of this is hard to read without a lot more time digging. India, symbol character breaks into various surveillance systems. There's also a ton of 9/11 symbolism in this film as I recall it being discussed years ago, some of the quotes being directly lifted from 9/11 in the film as they approach blown-up skyscrapers. The Transformers allow the terrorist attack the city so as to prove to the humans the threat. This part might be a parallel to 9/11 presented as a false flag. I have decoded other comms along this line, and as it's anti-Bush as a comm it's plausible it would invoke this idea. I'm still unsure myself on a lot of events to be revealed, but then that's why we need D-Class. Even with comms awareness there's a heck of a lot that's like a maze to untangle. Transformers 4, Extinction. So that's the end of the Shia line of Transformers, and now we have the final 3 films, 2 of which star Mark Wahlberg. One thing notable about this film is it was released in China first and was the highest-grossing movie in Chinese history. Film begins with extinction of dinosaurs and discovery of metal dinosaurs. Mark Wahlberg begins as an in-debt inventor buying material out of an old theater. He buys a broken-down Optimus Prime with the help of an employee. They small talk about showgirls attracting an audience. The main character has a family name of Jaeger. They are broke without government aid as the CIA hunts robots. Why does Jaeger matter? Symbolism of the most famous test pilot of NASA. Note his daughter is named Tessa. Tessa equals Tesla. Symbolism likely of Musk with Tesla/SpaceX and getting government subsidies. Tesla gained more than any other company I'm aware of at that time from the Obama admin, though I admit my knowledge is highly limited on who got how much from Obama's bills. This is a movement in funding ops defining Musk, who at the time was in the same revolutionary vein as Jaeger was. This helps explain why so many of the ops today run through Musk as I've decoded. This can be further seen with the other casting choices. Note above in the film that Jack Rayner was Tessa's secret boyfriend and rally car driver. What is the symbolism of bringing in this guy? January 23, 1992. Nintendo buys Washington Mariners, opens floodgates to Japanese players in U.S. baseball. January 23, 1992. Jack Rayner Transformers Age of Extinction secret boyfriend of Tessa Jaeger. Symbolism of bringing in new and at least partially foreign control spies. What then is the symbolism of Mark Wahlberg? A man who famously was called Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch before switching to acting. September 15, 1992. Marky Mark, You Gotta Believe, final album before Marky Mark switches to Wahlberg switching to acting, Gonna Have a Good Time, You Gotta Believe. September 15, 1992. Quantum Fund begins selling large amounts of pound sterling, labeled, The Man Who Broke the Bank of England, when pound crashes out of the next day. I believe the symbol here is in giving up. As in being crushed financially and then playing ball. This fits the timeframe largely, as just like with the other Obama-era Transformers films, there was a lot of money leaving the country and moving overseas. It fits this story too, as the key point is them being broke. If my hunch is right, the point is flipping towards a new power that can offer money. Musk seems to have been the middleman during the Obama era for some of this. Of course, when people flip, they have strings attached, and what are those strings made of? Note the story of Wahlberg and Tessa, a daughter that's 17 and always acts as the grown-up. She teaches Jaeger how to cook without ketchup, equals as in ketchup as a symbol for blood. Cooking someone with sex rather than threats of violence. As in using underage blackmail rather than killing. This becomes a heck of a lot clearer later. The conversation about her and her secret boyfriend involves carefully examining laws involving pedophilia. Mark threatens to call the police on him, but he is protected by Romeo and Juliet laws due to having dated when they were even younger. All of this is dancing around the symbolism of blackmail involving children. Note this scene with her grabbing his stick to get them to fly. Same reason why the old Ataris used joysticks. Notice, losing them in a cornfield. Corn equals calm symbolism, a cornfield is called a maze. Symbol of navigating the calms world. I had theorized that corn equals calm symbol in a recent post, and I'm confident of it now. So after having relations with the underage daughter, Mark is able to force him to talk under threat of exposure and arrest. Let's back up to the start of the film. So in this film, the military ends its alliance with the robots, and now the CIA headhunts both Autobots and Decepticons while pretending to only hunt Decepticons. The point of this is, I believe, partially in the breakdown in relationship the military seemed to have with Obama, which is what led to Trump. Given this was 2014 and all about turning government spying against itself, this ties into the NSA leaks and the push to remove surveillance so as to prevent criminal investigations. Snowden got a hold of NSA tech documents and exposed not long before this. Getting fingerprints. They make an effort to blackmail the military wing of government built into a tech company. I'm not sure who precisely is symbolized in this tech company, but unlike the primary villain, he flips to the Autobot side by the end. Their goal is to get an alien seed to product metal. The film says constant bad things about the USA, being dumb and evil, but then they go to China, and this film is very pro-China. Not that I'm not blindly viewing China in a negative or positive light, mind you, it's just jarring the difference. Spitting on one and then praising the other over and over again. You'd be forgiven if you wanted to move to China after seeing it. The Americans find out their products are actually ticking time bombs that will kill innocents. The head of the CIA thinks this is fine, but this changes the heart of the newly Chinese-based American tech company. A man who has to run from the CIA in China, but that's okay because he has a Chinese protector that can beat up all the bad guys. By itself that wouldn't be unusual, but later on the government characters from Chinese talk about protecting the people of China. I don't think a single negative light is shown in any way, and yet you have this contrast with how American government is shown as the root of all evil, constantly manipulated by evil robots to kill innocents for greed. Anyway, we have this scene with Jaeger throwing a Chinese-American football, which is not a popular sport anywhere but America, and hitting the CIA killer out the window. I suspect the symbolism there is of what the funding being moved to China purchased. I'm still not sure all the affiliations and motives, but there does seem to be agreements in place whenever various companies are given the keys to giant piles of money. Then giant robot dinosaurs. Optimus Prime befriends them to turn the tide on the CIA-built Megatron and bounty-hunting alien. Victoria's Secret, so this gives us a clue for the Epstein/Maxwell as likely part of it, which sheds light on why we have topless underage girls as one of the first topics of conversation in the film. See first image at start of section. Optimus breaks his vow and kills his first human in the US government agent. This might be symbolism for re-engaging MK Ops/assassination under Obama. And Tessa/Tesla, father gets a new CIA contracted business contact billionaire to begin. Just as Tesla achieved those same kinds of contracts. That's the end of the fourth one. The last Michael Bay one is far more educational for what is going on in precise terms. Transformers 5, The Last Night. Notice the relationship of this one to the next. Title of The Last Night, and then Michael Bay gets replaced by Night. This one gives us a clue about the infighting of factions. It explains a couple of mysteries I never understood until now, particularly the point of James Comey in his motives for hurting HRC in the election. The short answer is the villain of this film, Quintessa, is a symbol for HRC. Trying to take command the various cells in the form of Optimus Prime. To help clarify, I'll jump ahead. The main new cast member this time is a woman that wears stripper clothes named Vivian, and the journey involves obtaining a magic staff from her dead ancestor so as to defeat Quintessa. So, what is the symbol of her digging up the old bones of the past? August 20, 1985. Iran-Contra affair. First arms sale. Israel sent 96 missiles to Iran. Cocaine running. August 21, 1985. Laura Haddock-born heroine. Transformers. I believe this was a deeper game being played between Obama and Clinton factions. May 25, 2016. A State Department Inspector General report says Clinton failed to follow the rules or inform key department staff. May 25, 2016. Transformers 5 filming begins. Filming was done just barely before HRC lost. Thus the surprise Trump win is reflected in the final product. This film was meant to be released with HRC in charge. The Saudi Arabia faction behind Obama wanted leverage over Clinton as a safety, and so they prepared a scandal for this effect to be used. Blackmail that would ensure Clinton would never ever step out of line, and this is the stupid mistakes that Q often highlighted because they made their own bed on it. This is great clarity for me, as I always assumed before now these mistakes were hubris, but these were not really mistakes so much as an intentional leverage designed for international partners. Not just dumb mistakes. It fits the larger scope of how I understand things, and it's good to untie a knot like that. There's still plenty to go through that further reinforces this theory. Like the idea of healing one world in exchange for another, which is how the change is described later in the story. It's hinted at here though with there is a way to heal your world. The symbol of one world being sucked dry for another is Obama's side, i.e. Saudi Arabia suddenly getting the shaft under HRC. This is what they expected going into HRC time. This movie exists in part as a way to define the battle plan to keep from getting sucked dry. All of this helps to have context on the villain. The military returns and is one again hunting Autobots. Military working with DOJ releasing various criminals to work with Megatron due to a larger threat of extinction from Quintessa. I'm reminded of Obama pardons, but I doubt that's the precise meaning. So they have to find a book made of magic scrotum, which is, if you recall from the second film, a reference to their attacking the giant robot testicles. In this case it seems to be a reference to Blackmail Reservoir. This is where the heroine Vivian, born same day as Iran-Contra scandal, comes into the story with a stripper dress. She is kidnapped by Anthony Hopkins with a psychotic robot butler. His family is the secret keepers for the Autobots and shows various artifacts like the watch that killed Hitler. This reminds me that Megatron turns into a Nazi gun. The description of various historical figures as part of this family. Tesla and Teddy Roosevelt I've decoded before, and the sequence of putting Edmund Hillary next to Teddy Roosevelt is likely a symbol of blackmail given the greater context of the film. Here they take over a submarine. Submarine symbolism is of a hidden agent that is posed to be activated and surface. This fits several types including MK Ops. This fits the symbol of Hopkins' psychotic butler who prefers the word sociopath. The psychotic robot fires himself like a torpedo. As in an activated psychopath being used as a threat. Meanwhile Anthony Hopkins infiltrates the Prime Minister's quarters and forces the entire British government to give support with death threats. These two symbols are tied together, the threat of firing a psychopath that can infiltrate the British government. The climax of the film takes place at Stonehenge. Stonehenge. A symbol I've failed to decode in the past, but I'm pretty sure I've got it now. Symbol of many doors. A symbol for many countries coming together in one place. This can be used for all sorts of operations, but critically the location being in England fits the Rothschilds and thus the center of central banks. In context here the point is in bringing all parties together. This decode can be further reinforced by reconciling with another decode of mine. Salisbury's symbolism as the location of Stonehenge. I went over that word before in context to many doors converging. South Park also had a symbolism of monitoring MK ops by foreign factions. Effectively another symbol of many doors in one place, and that's a focus of the first episode. Getting Salisbury steak. Same place of Stonehenge. Check the post on Kanye for more on that. So after attacking the villains Anthony Hopkins dies, which as he controlled the psychotic butler, the symbolism here is of MK Ops handlers that post-activation die, so as to avoid retribution. Hence all the talk of sacrifice. Remember that the last film involved Optimus Prime discarding his vow not to kill humans. Thus now we have the floodgate open for terrorist usage rather than an often disregarded rule not to use psychopaths, like the first two films had. All this leads to the Allies converging and having Bumblebee be the surprise attack. The symbol of surveillance/bug tied to evidence against HRC. Moreover, while filming was done before the surprise election, the release was after Trump. June 21, 2017, Saudi Arabia Crown Prince Salman. June 21, 2017, Transformers: The Last Night. Release time to the change in leadership to Trump's ally. And given the HRC evidence comms inside this film, it gives some clarity there. Remember, the film was made and finished while HRC was the expected winner, so the comms in the film do not largely reflect the changes, but there is a point of timing these two together. I believe the point is in the secret information the film defines to be used as leverage against HRC is still intended to be used by Salman. Time for the final Transformers movie. Transformers 6, Bumblebee. Film is entirely a prequel and once again involves military hunting the alien robots. Bumblebee starts off as a military jeep, then a bug, then a Camaro. Tying possibly into the military origins before switching to private citizenry around that time. Cooperation. Songs first played by the main character in this film, How Joan of Arc Felt. May 16, 1986. Top Gun released, top film of 1986. May 19, 1986. Big Mouth Strike Again, How Joan of Arc Felt. I've decoded Joan of Arc in a few posts, check my New Orleans post for the full thing, but to briefly go over it. The story of Joan of Arc involves Joan having absolute faith in God and following all instructions. When you read the story with an awareness she lived, the entire thing goes from being a tragedy to a story about how trusting faith in an emergency is crucial. How a leap of faith is rewarded. The New Orleans connection is because it seems this was the refuge taken, and ever since the city has had a symbolism tied to faking deaths. The point in this film is how the daughter plays the song, How Joan of Arc Felt, as she looks at a picture of her recently deceased father. This is to say, this daughter symbolizes the daughter of a spy that took a fake death. Daughter is expert at diving. Water equals info, symbolism of her being comms aware and able to plunge into ops. She is given the task of making sure her little karate fighting little brother doesn't get abducted. This is an offshoot of the comms from the first few films, looking after MK ops, as karate was used to define an MK victim in the 80-foot and early 90s. Check my Street Fighter post for more on that. In this case it's about protecting them. Specifically, as this is post-Trump, it's about keeping cleanup from happening against MK victims, as future lawsuits are now in play when the whole MK system goes public. This is different from the karate comms I've decoded from that time period. This may seem like it's incompatible at times with other comms I've gone over, like the 1986 Japan comms above, that suggest cooperation with finding/diffusing these ops, but remember the structure of the comms world. It's not uniform, it's a million cells with varying motives and strings that are mysterious even to each other. If I say, Japan is cooperating or not cooperating, I really should say a certain percentage of cells inside, but that's a mouthful. There are many and they fight with each other. So the Autobots in this film are focused on trying to establish a base on Earth. Main character turns 18. No longer 17 calm. 17 being the secrecy calm, so the day afterwards. Notice it's not cleaning toilets but detailing toilets, as in giving information. I will detail your disgusting toilets, symbol of what is being bugged. She makes peace with the Bumblebee instantly. It transitions from full moon to trailer abusive relationship. Cons of watching abusive people. Trailer couple sees an asteroid, that thing is coming right for US. And it destroys their car, turning out to be the Decepticons. The symbolism of this trailer living couple used for MK Ops. Notice how his wife begins the scene on a full moon, reveals symbolism, and she begins gaslighting him over and over with past secrets. His attempt at sleeping with his sister and buying a car with money meant to buy a house. This is how activation occurs of killers. Secrets are collected, and when they need a killer they are revealed in such a way that drives them past their limits to break. This is why the evil robots begin killing spree by killing the trailer couple. This is symbolism for the killing these robots do in the film being tied to using people like this. Get it? We see this abusive couple manipulated in precisely the way to create a killer, and then killer robots appear and kill them. Those killer robots then kill other people. This is a direct parallel to how killers are used/sacrificed to kill others. They of course die themselves, so that's why they are the first to die. Men in Black had the exact same symbolism at the start with an abusive husband. It's all symbols of programmed people being sent for evil. This is where MK Ops originate from, and this fits the Ops post Top Gun working with military. So yes, this ties everything together. Her father died, and new op for family post Fallout is in acting as a bug to keep track of potential killers. Once she has the agreement to take Bumblebee, he wants to listen to the records from her dead father. He refuses the first piece she gives. He doesn't want to listen to the song about the girl in a coma. This is a symbol of sleep op. Last night I dreamt that somebody loved me. Lyrics of Just Another False Alarm. All of that is symbolism for blackmail, and it's what Bumblebee is saying he doesn't want this time. These are comms post-Trump, and so it's not surprising I now see rejection of underage blackmail. Notice the song the father is tied to is a sex song, and then died of a heart attack. Symbolism of why a death would be taken to avoid the arrest. The film gives a history on how alien robots are the origin of the internet. Remember how the Finders cult worked using 1977 machines, so, yeah, this is accurate. The internet began as a way for aliens to coordinate. After learning about radio comms, we get the high dive symbol, as her peers try and get her to jump from up high. As in follow the comms she hears. However, she rejects this and instead she uses Bumblebee to attack the car and house of a girl that was rude to her, breaking eggs and the car itself. This is symbolism for making a mistake. The comms going on at this time was about defusing these MK Ops, and instead of taking the high dive, she uses MK Ops for revenge. It's defining the landscape of people tied to these ops with an awareness some will be making mistakes and showing the results of it. After utilizing spy ops to attack the girl she has to hide from police, Bumblebee goes berserk and destroys her house. Remember, Bumblebee was just used to attack the other girl's house. Now we see the after effects, that if you use MK Ops to destroy someone else, you yourself get destroyed. This I believe represents control over family with MK Ops. In her case, her brother being one of many controlled entities that are wielded like rocks to throw and get away with things. Having Bumblebee egg a house is exactly the kind of juvenile activity that would be conditioned into an early MK kid the age of her brother. As a side note, at one point the boy has nunchucks, and I suspect this is a symbol for nun, church and innocent, plus chuck, throwing and violence, as in someone that acts innocent while creating a lunatic to throw at enemies. That's my cursory take. Some of these comms I solve using extensive patterns and others I guess at. You need to pay attention to your own reasoning, as I am very well aware these posts are at times only partially high confidence. The parts that are low confidence aren't always marked, so if you just believe anything and everything, you are going to believe a few lies every post I make. Not intentionally on my part, mind you, just law of averages. I know from experience some of my decodes turn out wrong. It's almost always the ones that have no patterns and are just me spitballing something like, hey, maybe nunchucks are a symbolism for the Vatican throwing lunatics. I know the church is tied to it after all. But I need to find some history with nunchucks before making a declaration like that. Still, it's a good hypothesis to test for the future. Anyway, now it's all trying to get Bumblebee under control. He begins acting violent only when the older sister is in danger. The handler/driver. Final attack of Bumblebee is blowing up the dam. Water equals info and getting rid of the bad guys with all the surveilled info. The military guy leaves them in peace and switches from hunting all illegal aliens to only the uncooperative ones at the end. Symbol of ignoring spies so long as cooperative. And that's every major Transformers film. I had quite a few other comms decoded this week, but Transformers ended up sucking up the entire post capacity. In fact, it ended up being about 50% overflow and I had to condense almost every image. I doubt I'll do posts like this very often with just one subject, but I did figure out some important things, so I hope a few people stuck with it. There are still quite a few parts one don't fully understand, and I'd be shocked if I didn't have at least some of the puzzle wrong. The only way I can verify is through patterns, and while several of the patterns I have are solid at this point, the quantity of information is. And since I know some people come for the updates with a higher priority than learning comms, here's a small one I miraculously was able to fit in. Updates. Actually, these updates are surprisingly relevant to this decode. Transformers 2 involved the secrets of the Great Pyramids extensively. So a few days ago they found a hidden corridor in the Great Pyramid of Giza. This led me to dig into the history of that finding, which led to November 3, 2017. Scientists discover mysterious void in Great Pyramid of Giza. November 4, 2017. Al-Walid billionaire arrested. March 3, 2023. Hidden corridor discovered. Pharaoh may have had more places he buried things. Images recovered. Within a day of the original void found, we had that famous roundup of Al-Walid, the day Q highlighted as the day one side of the pyramid fell. Thus now we can see inside, and this is symbolism, I believe, for the evidence procured. So it's about evidence from the highest level of the cult. The void looks to me like a symbol for keeping the stuff they found away from public eye for the moment, while the new ones looks to be about presenting it. Presenting what? Appears to be the 9/11 booms. Al-Walid is someone Q specifically connected to 9/11. November 20, 2003. New York ordered to hand over hidden 9/11 evidence/tapes. November 20, 2003. Asteroid Dimorphos discovered. June 23, 2020. Dimorphos asteroid named for human intervention. June 24, 2020. DOJ superseding indictment against Assange for hacking secret documents. November 3, 2021. Art installation creates optical illusions at Giza pyramids. November 3, 2021. Biden admin blacklists Israeli spyware firms in unprecedented move. November 3, 2021. Encanto Bruno partial release, We Don't Talk About, Rat Song. November 24, 2021. NASA DART Dimorphos mission redirection test September 2022 hit. November 24, 2021. Encanto Bruno worldwide release We Don't Talk About, by Bush and Rat Song. September 26, 2022. Nord Stream pipeline sabotage. September 26, 2022. NASA DART Dimorphos impact. A lot of dates, but the crux is the asteroid symbolizing 9/11 evidence. It exists as a way to define the secret evidence that at the time seemed unlikely to surface. The asteroid gains its name within a day of the DOJ creating a new indictment against Assange for secret documents. The vehicle to deliver any and all evidence. The actual asteroid mission was said to have the goal of preventing future disasters, and 9/11 is certainly something that qualifies there. The day the missile launched for the asteroid was the same day the next big film by Disney hit Encanto, a film made by a man named Bush, the president at the time of 9/11. The film had a notable trend of rat-related memes due to the song, which was the first song to beat Frozen's Let It Go on the charts for Disney. This is relevant because that film symbolized the Snowden leaks. Check my Frozen post for more on that. It's also relevant because the most popular songs are often used to represent upcoming narratives. Symbolism of singing along with it. The day the asteroid was hit was the same day of the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage, causing billions in damages to the pipeline from Russia to Germany. Putin playing the villain. Sequence calm from Musk. It's not all a movie, but a lot of it is theatrics. Another update is a decode from the community from General Flynn. October 26, 2022. Flynn warns of false flags with 99 red Luft balloons. Plus 99 days. February 2, 2023. Department of Defense announced Chinese red balloon spotted. Several additional spy balloons spotted. Balloons originally viewed as UFO, alien symbol, and knocking them out of the sky by identifying early is akin to finding terrorists inside the country early and removing. So this is all connected, and I can even bring it all full circle. Another 99 red balloons appearance. From Boogie Nights time to escalating violence from someone suddenly turning into a lunatic and murdering their host who never sees it coming. This is the film I covered earlier as tied to Transformers 4 and 5-star Mark Wahlberg. I need to dig further to really clarify what's going on here, but I did notice they made the main character born on the same day as Bay of Pigs. The event that got CIA head Dulles fired, which arguably created the domino effect leading to the assassinations by the CIA using another blackmail terrorist. In that sense, everything is connected by these brainwashing ops, but I need to dig further into a lot of these links. I mentioned above Encanto, well, that movie also had the symbolism of helping the mentally ill in exchange for funding, and that fits what's going on with the MK ops as best I can tell. It's all going to the right place. Hopefully with tons more to be revealed, and as a world we can finally begin moving beyond these global spats for control. The only way any of that happens is with a more informed populace. So let's keep going. I do what I can here and others do what they can. The world is a heavy thing to lift, but as more and more people start helping, it'll happen. Telegram chat. Join our Telegram group. Send leads, begin decoding. This has been Transformers in DIA Clone.